blah, blah, blah.
Hello and welcome to a brief advertisement for Duncan Driver's talk on engaging students by modelling enthusiasm. I suppose the first thing I'd want to address when preparing you for my talk is why modelling enthusiasm is important at a college level more than at another educational level.
And then it's
I think, and it touches on a cliche, which like most cliches has some basis in truth. Students at a college level, like a lot of adolescents, are mired in the malaise of apathy. And so what we need to aim for in trying to get our students less apathetic and more enthusiastic or more engaged is we need to persuade them that learning itself is worthwhile, both in terms of what it can lead to, is in terms of career or developing skill sets that will become beneficial to them, but also just learning for its own sake. As A.E. Housman said, all knowledge is precious, whether or not it serves the slightest human use. And what I also want to talk about is how to inspire students by demonstrating your own mastery of your subject, what I would call your deep content knowledge, and how exciting it is to have that level of mastery. And that's something that needs to be demonstrated by a model. Also, you need to model the ways in which you yourself are living proof of the benefits of what you espouse. So if I, as an English teacher, want to be able to persuade my students that poetry, for example, is a brilliant way to conceive of and think about the world, and it makes you a passionate and engaged and clever individual, I think I need to be a walking, talking example of how and why that's true. And we want to be able to create the conditions in which a desire to learn becomes self-motivated. So modelling enthusiasm is not just about you being this sort of puppet of everything you want students to be. It's about setting a ball in motion that then becomes self-perpetuating and endlessly self-regenerating. Largely what I'm talking about is a theory of education derived from a very old concept of how it works, Aristotelian mimesis, which is the oldest theory of how we learn. It's also where the word mime comes from, but I'm not just talking about students imitating or miming what I do. What I'm talking about is how learning occurs when students observe and intuit and remember and then are capable of reproducing what their models do. And I'm not just talking about me as a teacher, but successful peer models as well, which in many cases are much more successful and much more influential than teachers modeling. So it works a little bit like M.C. Escher's illustration there of mimetic hands, which kind of draw each other and fill each other in as they go. This is also a theory that derives from Albert Bandura's social constructivism, specific aspects of it that we call observational learning and vicarious learning. So this is a theory in which students identify and absorb the patterns of thought, the behavior, the attitudes, the values and the moral systems of the adults with whom they interact. We know that this is true even without applying it in an educational context. Haven't you ever been at a parent-teacher night, meeting the parents of a bad or an at-risk or a troublesome student and instantly thinking, well, that explains everything. The parent is exactly like the student. So this just goes to show how influential these adult models can be. Albert Bandura says that observational learning is shown most clearly when models exhibit novel patterns of thought or behavior, which observers did not already possess, but which following observation they can produce in a similar form. So this is the thing that I'm really interested in talking about in my sessions that I run during the Teach Meet. This is not just about allowing the students to draw out from within things that they are concerned with or that influence their daily lives. It's about kind of opening doors into their psyches that they didn't even know were there in the first place. And that can only be done by people who have been through that process before. This is why modeling is important. At this point, some of you might be thinking, is Duncan just trying to turn his students into little versions of himself? Doesn't observational learning inhibit originality or creativity if all they're doing is mimicking or miming or being a version of you? No, I think that actually quite the opposite is the case, and I'll just use the last little bit of this advertisement to demonstrate why. Albert Bandura again. Creative achievements do not spring from a vacuum. They are built in part on the preceding innovations of others. Modeling probably contributes most to creative development in the inception of new styles. Innovators achieve novelty by incorporating new elements into customary forms. Once initiated, experiences with new forms create further evolutionary changes. So we only need to look at the world of technology to know that that's true. Look at how the development of the iPhone and the iPad through Steve Jobs and Johnny Ives and what they're doing in Apple led to a whole raft of further innovations in Android phone technology, which then fed back into the Apple's iPhone. The new operating system is so much more like the Samsung Galaxy than the original iPhone. This is a way of demonstrating how creativity builds on others' creativity. It doesn't occur in a vacuum. Okay, you need to stand effectively on the shoulders of giants in order to be creative, and that's what models are there for. Another way of making the same point is that, say if I was a music teacher, and I said to a student who never played the piano before, go on, just express yourself, be creative. The sound they made would be cacophonous. It would sound horrible, which is as much to say you need a model there to be able to show you how certain rules and systems work in order for creativity itself to flourish. The national curriculum, I think, is with me on this. If you read at least the information that concerns achievement standards in English, it says things like students need to consider how perspectives and values are represented, reflect on a range of interpretations as they develop their own interpretations, learn how to communicate logically, persuasively, and imaginatively in a range of different contexts. So what I'm going to be able to hope to do for you in my session is give you one concrete and focused example of how we can do this in a lesson on English poetry. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you at my session.